1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad that you are with us. We are back in the DFS lab as always. Show presented by 1 week season, where we build a lineup on DraftKings and use that as a way to talk through the upcoming slate. In this case, we are looking at week 16 and the show airing first on Thursday, December 19th. And so glad you're with us as always. And welcoming up StatATL. I'm your host, Cheeseman, by the way. And Stat, how did week 15 turn out for you? For me, it was actually I had one lineup that cashed, but that was enough to like cover my entry fees, give me a slight bit of profit. I had a Josh Allen with Naked, and then ran it back with Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I played very little though. Like I just this weekend, the next 3 weekends, I'm actually gonna have some time to like put research in during crunch time, and I'm hoping to actually, go a little heavier with entry fees, try and just go all in to try and make this season one to remember, because so far it has certainly not been. But all that to say, yeah, how was last weekend for you?
Similar, I guess. I didn't play the same volume that I normally play. It was a busy week. We were traveling. But it wasn't a great week for me. I think I was down like 70%. ROI. I locked Derrick Henry last week, and I thought that was such a great spot for him. And, Lamar Jackson came out and threw 5 touchdowns and went for whatever, 350 yards, total yards with 5 touchdowns. So he had a monster game, but that just kind of just meant that Derrick Henry didn't. So again, to me, I loved the spot. I thought he was coming in well under-owned compared to his likelihood of putting up a really strong game. And on that sample size of 1 week, it just didn't pan out. So we move on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had Derrick Henry in, I think I had like 4 different lineups, and I think I had him in 3. Maybe the one that cashed didn't have him, but it was a great spot for him. And when a guy's not going to be highly owned with the upside that he has, how do you not take a swing on that? This has been the year of just the studs, like, Saquon, CeeDee Lamb, Derrick Henry in this case. Like when we play them on the main slate, they don't have good games, and then they go into the island games and they go nuclear. It's just been a weird season like that. Again, we have to remember it's a small sample size, only 18 weeks of the NFL season if you're only playing main slates. So, I mean, I think in a vacuum, that was a great play. Can't really, that's just one of those where you have to kind of just swallow it and move on. It's never a great feeling, but I totally get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, compared to baseball or basketball, it's just, such a smaller sample size compared to just one season of MLB. One season of MLB is probably the equivalent of 10 NFL seasons. Yeah. So, it's tough. I wouldn't beat yourself up if you're, not cashing multiple weeks in a row. There are plenty of very strong players who have been consistent winners who will go on what feels like long losing streaks of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of where they're just down 50% or more of their buy-ins. And it's just because it's a small sample size. It doesn't mean that you're playing bad.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I remember talking to Zandamir on one of our Showdown DFS labs. It was early in the season, like maybe week 4 or 5, and he told the story about a situation like that for him, where it was I forget, I think someone in the comments said it was probably one of the best like soft flexes that they have ever heard, because Zandamir said something to the effect of, I almost was getting to the point where I had to redeposit, and insinuated he never had to do that before. But he was saying that he had been on a very long losing streak, and good players go through that. And, it does take a toll on your psyche. But you just have to reevaluate your play, make sure you're still making the right calls. And if you are, process is good. You can't control the results, So all that to say, let's quickly pull up last week's lineup, which ultimately we wouldn't have put this in place. I don't know if we can count this in our season-long record because Cedric Tillman ended up being inactive. But of course, went with Derrick Henry, which again, solid play. Rico Dowdle, I forget. Did Rico Dowdle how did he do? I forget now.
I think Rico Dowdle had a career day.
He was good. That's right. He had a lot of carries too.
I can quickly look it up, but yeah, I mean, I think that he went for like 150 yards.
So yeah, Dowdle was a solid play. But yeah,
I think that sounds right.
We've talked already, obviously Derrick Henry with him in the lineup with, man, how many points he had? Did he have under 10 fantasy points? I think so.
Probably. I think he went for like 70 yards, maybe one catch. That's they just, I mean, it wasn't like they didn't run at all. I think he probably had like 15 touches. It wasn't like he wasn't involved, but they just blew out the Giants and all the scores came through the air.
And Dowdle had 25 carries, 149 yards, but no touchdowns and no receptions. So he had a solid game. But for the 25 carries, if he'd at least gotten one touchdown, would have been a lot bigger. With that, man, let's jump in now to week 16. Dude, 3 weeks left here. So it's time to get at it. I'll quickly give you just a game as I pull up our contest here. I'll say an offense that I really like as we get set looking here at week 16. I love Aaron Rodgers again. That might feel point chasey, but for his price, being at home and the matchup against the Rams is very attractive. And man, I mean, just even the pricing of, obviously I don't expect Devontae Adams to have the kind of game again that he did this past weekend, but a solid game from him at his price, you wouldn't be upset about. And then you also could throw in Garrett Wilson as well. Even Breece Hall, apparently maybe Breece Hall just is not kind of have the same role that he did earlier in the season. He's only 6,100 now, but I overall like the Jets offense for week 16.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. I mean, Aaron Rodgers to me on my first look, I found him very intriguing. 5,600 coming off the two best games of the year, and the Rams have given up 300 total yards to like Kyler Murray and Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, Josh Allen, May. Like they certainly have given up some big games, and I think it's, as you mentioned, it's super easy to pair him with Devontae Adams. Rams have given up monster games to like the same archetype as like Devontae Adams. I think Jawan Jennings went for 175 and 3 touchdowns. Jackson Smith-Njigba went for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison went for like 130 and 2 touches. Like they've given up some monster games to wide receivers. So yeah, I mean, I could totally see that as a strong stack, Adams and Rodgers this week for sure. Who else? To me, when I first the Bengals were just jumping off the page. I think maybe I would probably temper some of those expectations just because like Dorian Thompson-Robinson's going to be starting for the Browns. So I don't know that the Bengals will really get pushed. I think DTR has like 1 touchdown and like 9 interceptions in like his career or something like that, where it's just like I just don't expect him to have a lot of success, even though Cincinnati's defense is probably kind of middle of the pack. I don't see them letting Burrow throw for 300-400 yards and multiple 4 touchdowns. Kind of what you need at his price. I would have been really intrigued by this game had we not moved away from Jameis to Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Yeah, man, seriously, I would have loved to roster Jameis Winston this week with the way the Bengals have been just a very fantasy-friendly defense. I mean, the Cowboys have actually been playing decent, but again, they've had a very easy string of matchups. So, yeah, I'm disappointed, man. Come on, Browns. Like, don't you understand like how fun it is to play Jameis in a matchup like this? But they don't care about us.
I can't believe they're forgetting about their DFS friends. Come on, guys.
That's right, man.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I like I mean, it's hard not to like the Bills at home. Like they've got a team total over 30, and Josh Allen is coming off literally like back-to-back weeks of like the best fantasy score ever. I think he's got literally just under 100 points, like 99.3 fantasy points, like the last 2 weeks combined, basically averaging 50 points a week. And now he's at home. They are still live for that number 1 seed, just kind of depending on the health of Patrick Mahomes, who left last week with an ankle injury. And the Chiefs have a tough schedule upcoming. So they could lose 2 games. Certainly if Mahomes is limited or inactive, they could certainly lose 2 games. So, and the Bills have a real easy schedule. I think they play the Patriots twice and the Jets is their final. Their final 3 games there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Bills come out firing here and then put up 30, 40 points against the Patriots. The Lions, I think, are interesting against the Bears. Be interesting to kind of see what that offense looks like without David Montgomery. Kind of a spot where, we'll get into it when we build the lineup, but like kind of jumps right off the page. Like it didn't work out for us last week with Derrick Henry, but I feel like this is a spot where I'm probably considering locking Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yes.
So we'll kind of see where that goes. And I don't know. I think that there's a couple of game environments that are interesting, but I think that there's a couple of spots that we've talked about that just kind of, jump off the page. You take a look at teams that are fighting for playoff positions, playing teams that, are not in, playoff contention. Like you look at the Falcons at the Giants, like, the Falcons they probably need to win out to have a shot to make the playoffs, and that still may not happen. So, and the Giants season is obviously over. And then, you've got the Cardinals who are a game back, playing the Panthers. They probably need to come close to winning out to make the playoffs as well. So,
yes,
those are some interesting spots to me, even though like the game environment doesn't jump out like it does for one side of the ball to me.
Do you like the Dolphins? What do you think about the Dolphins or that Dolphins-Niners game in general?
So the Dolphins Niners game to me is interesting. I think both teams are likely out of the playoff picture for 2024. But it still has some potential fantasy goodness. I think probably stands out a little bit to Devon A. Chan. His price is down to 7,400. He's really involved in the pass game work. I think he's got 23 targets the last 3 games, so averaging basically 8 targets a game. And so that kind of catches my eye as certainly a good potential for floor play. I don't know. I mean, the ceiling is always there.
Point, yeah. Sorry, you just don't know how these teams are going to play when.
I mean, the ceiling's always there for Tyreek Hill. Yeah, I mean, certainly, like you could gamble on some of those games. I think that there's some uncertainty for teams that like have nothing to play for. I don't know that you could tell the Dolphins or the 49ers that they have nothing to play for because they're both not mathematically eliminated yet, but both teams are very unlikely, like 1% or something like that, to make the playoffs. So I don't know. Like to me, I would much rather kind of bet on teams that I know are going to really likely to ride their stud players because they have to win at this point of the season, or else their season is likely over.
No, that is a great shot, man. I love that. Great reminder for me as well. And with that, let's jump into this lineup. Where do you want to start with this build? We're in the red zone, $50 single entry, which is the one we like to target on this show.
Yeah, this has been a good contest for me over the years, so I love that we continue to build in it. So to me, like I think that there is a strong spot for value at quarterback. So I'm okay with maybe trying to thread a little bit of a thinner needle here at some of these positions. And let's start at running back, actually. To me, there are 3 plays that really kind of jump off the page to me. And if we kind of just start at the top, it's Bijan Robinson just below Saquon Barkley there. We've targeted running backs against the Giants all season. And I don't think it's going to stop this week. The Falcons basically have their back against the wall in the playoff hunt. So much so, and Kirk Cousins has struggled so much so that they've moved away from Cousins, and they're going to start the rookie, Michael Penix, this week. So I'm expecting Atlanta to kind of lean on Bijan here once again. He's got 20 or more touches in 7 out of the last 8 games. And, he's facing the Giants defense here that's allowed 5 running backs to top 130 total yards recently. So to me, that's kind of like a lock button, potential lock button. I mean, I say that a little loosely. A real lock button for me is probably going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Playing against the Bears team, like this is kind of a nut matchup for Gibbs. Like just looking at like the last 5 weeks, the Bears gave up 129 yards to Aaron Jones, 134 yards to Josh Jacobs, 128 yards to Isaac Orendo, 106 yards to Aaron Jones, in the second time they played, what was that, 2 nights ago? And then he gave up 228 to the combination of Montgomery and Gibbs when these teams squared off again back in like week 13. So in that game, Gibbs went for 104 yards on just 11 touches. I got to expect that number is going to be closer to 18 to 20 touches this week. Like he's going to have the backfield. I don't want to say all to himself because he's probably not going to handle more than like 75% of the snaps. That's just not generally what they like to do, but he has shown how efficient he can be on less snaps. So I really like that. I really like that for him. And I think that along with Gibbs, I think like this is a really strong spot for some correlation. You've got, 7 different wide receivers have gone for 20 plus points, against Detroit this season. So I think it's a strong spot for the Bears. And I think one of more Allen Odunze is going to give you a tournament valuable score this week. They're all priced between 5,100 and 5,700. And I think the only offense that Detroit stymied all year was like Jacksonville. And Brian Thomas kind of gave you that. I think his line was like 5 for 82. And that was kind of like the worst output to date. So like the top scoring player, top scoring wide receiver against Detroit, the worst line was 5 for 82. So I feel like you're likely to get a 15, 20 point score, if not a little bit higher, out of one of more Allen and Odunze, and they're all in the 5K range. So I think an interesting potential strategy this week for those people who build on like optimizers or who are ME players is just to kind of make a rule of like one of those 3 players in every lineup. Because I think it's very likely that one of them gives you a 20-point score, and they're all in the that mid 5K range where you're kind of getting a 4x score out of all of them. So let's go with like DJ Moore on this build, and just kind of see where that leaves us. And then the final running back where I really want to get to is James Conner. Like we've been attacking Carolina with opposing running backs all season. Conner's coming off back-to-back games of 120 total yards, and he's got 3 straight games of 20 or more touches. And I'm going to expect a heavy workload from him again because Trey Benson's dealing with that ankle injury, didn't practice again today, and they just put their passing back DeMarc Cardell on IR a couple of days ago. So like I just don't see them getting away from, unless there's an injury, like I just don't see a way where Conner doesn't touch the ball 20 to 25 times. And the Panthers have allowed a running back to rush for over 100 yards in 4 out of the past 5 weeks, including like Bucky Irving and Rico Dowdle, both posted their best career rushing games in like literally like the last 2 weeks. So I think this is a really strong spot for Conner. And again, like this gives us the opportunity because again, we're looking at 4,300 a player at this point, and we still have to fill quarterback and wide receivers. Like this gives us an opportunity here for a little bit more correlation. with this Carolina-Arizona game, just because Xavier Legette is likely to miss again. And you had Jalen Coker come back last week and played a good bit more snaps than usual out of the slot, where he was kind of rotating between the slot and outside with Adam Thielen. And Coker had a monster game last week and only saw his price rise like $400 or $500. So at 4,200, like I love plugging Coker in here and giving us a little correlation. Just because if Connor is kind of having that really strong game, it likely means that Carolina's in a trailing game script throwing the ball more. So that kind of has them have some of that correlation of, sometimes people I feel like say correlation. I'm playing these two guys because they're correlated. Well, they're not really correlated. Like, when you're playing two wide receivers against each other, it doesn't necessarily, different positions, different game situations doesn't mean that this guy is more likely to have a better game just because one guy is having a better game. What in this situation, if James Conner is putting up a really strong score and getting you rushing touchdowns, it likely means Carolina is playing from behind and throwing more. So I do like that.
Absolutely, man. So, absolutely. And I love the Coker play. We're off to a good start. But yeah, like you said, 4,400 left. You still got to look at quarterback. Where do you want to go first, though? Here, do you want to look at your defense first, or do you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's look at D. In my first look, I think I identified like the usual kind of like 5 or 6 Ds, usually 1 or 2 pay up, 1 or 2 mid range, 1 or 2 kind of cheapies. And in my first look, like the Titans were the cheapest D I felt comfortable with at 2,600. Even though they're on the road, they're going up against Anthony Richardson. Never know what you're getting with him. Could be a bunch of turnovers. Could be a really strong game, but again, when you're playing in a tournament, like you're only really considering, ceiling outcomes. Like if they have a horrible game or Gibbs, doesn't have a great game, like this lineup's likely losing. So I'm really only concerned about what could happen that's good. So I don't know. This gets us up to closer to 5,000. So that's a little bit more workable. I kind of hinted at it earlier when we were talking about Bijan Robinson. But I think where I'm going to potentially go in this lineup is moving back to Atlanta. So the news out of Atlanta today or yesterday was that Atlanta's going to shut down and bench Kirk Cousins, who's really struggled. I think he's got 1 touchdown and 8 interceptions the last 4 games or something like that. Like he's really been struggling. Is they're going to move to the number 8 overall pick, Michael Penix, and he is, was a highly drafted rookie quarterback. He is 4,500, and he's coming in, to play at home in a good environment against the Giants, and the Giants just gave up 350 total yards and 5 touchdowns to Lamar Jackson last week. So obviously, I'm not comparing, Penix to Lamar Jackson, but I'm just saying the Giants are definitely a beatable team where we could very easily see, him throw for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. Very viable game there. And, that's given you close to 18 to 20 points, which is really all you need at 4,500, which is his salary. So I do really like that. And
yeah, man, I got to say, I got distracted there for a second because I quickly just went on X to search up Cousins, wanted to just try to see when they dropped the news. The first thing I saw was Kirk Cousins is probably something to the effect of Kirk Cousins now gets to be paid $180 million to stand on the sideline and not get hit.
Not wrong.
Not the worst. I'm sure that Kirk Cousins isn't happy to be benched, or maybe he is. I don't know. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, I do love. Yeah, I love the Penix play. The matchup is certainly there. He's at home. He certainly has the weapons. So,
yeah, maybe we should add one of these. It's so interesting. So Kirk Cousins, I think in his career is going to make $325 million. And he's literally won one playoff game. It's wow, I need a job like that. But yeah, I think this is a spot against the Giants where I don't mind a Penix double stack. And I think, I think with the salary that we have remaining, like Mooney makes more sense. Nothing wrong with, going a different direction. I think that this kind of just gives us a little bit more flexibility. I think that he's going to be pretty low owned, even though I do feel like at 4,500, Penix is going to carry some ownership. But I think your box score watchers are going to look and see he only had one target last week and
goose egg
and a goose egg on the scoreboard. I think that's going to be a tough click for some folks.
Yeah.
But we've seen the 20, 25 point games out of Mooney already this year. So, I think that if we're looking at it as a player block of Penix, Bijan, and Mooney, I think we could get to a combined 4x total score between the three of them. I don't think that's out of the question at all. So leaves us with 4,900 and tight end to go. There's a couple of options here. I think you could consider, even without Goff, I think that you could consider Sam Laporta here, just because I think with David Montgomery out, maybe that changes the dynamic a little bit more. We see Laporta involved. I think Laporta's coming off his most involved game of the season last week, and that was with 10 targets, and that was a lot of that came in the second half with David Montgomery injured. So I think that's certainly a spot that you could kind of go on and kind of build around that game, kind of exceeding expectations with both Gibbs and Laporta, and we've got more in this lineup as well. I think, though, kind of an environment I do want to get a little exposure to is the Vikings at the Seahawks. Through the air, Seattle has been pretty friendly matchup to both wide receivers and tight ends. I think they've allowed like 16 or more fantasy points to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 17 players through 14 weeks. So I think this is a really interesting spot for like Jefferson, for Addison, for TJ Hawkinson. And so obviously Hawkinson fits into this build at 4,800. We've seen him have those 7, 8, 9 target games already this year. So certainly has that 15, 20, 25 point upside. I don't know that we've seen that upside quite this year. But again, he hasn't, I think he's only played 5 or 6 games. So I kind of like where we landed here. We have some correlation. We've got some game environments that I do really like. And I don't know how common it's going to be to pay up for 3 running backs above 7K this week. Like it kind of felt uncomfortable to build this lineup.
No, yeah, man, I absolutely love it. I absolutely think that always tends to be a unique construction because most people like to go 1 pay up and then 1 mid-range running back. That's the most comfortable way to build the antithesis to what you just said. So I like it. And I mean, Penix is clearly talented. Obviously, it's his first NFL start, so we know how those can go. But at 4,500, you could do a lot worse. I like Penix a lot, and something that I'll definitely be considering. Again, especially considering the matchup and just all the weapons he has around him, could easily see him having a good game. So the lineup we landed on, Penix Jr. at the QB with Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, DJ Moore, Jalen Coker, Darnell Mooney, TJ Hawkinson, James Conner in the flex, and the Titans D stat. Really sharp stuff as always, brother. Anything you want to add before we ship this one?
Nope. Hoping that it's you or me at the top of a leaderboard this week. If not, hopefully it's one of those OWS subscribers.
Yes. 3 weeks left. So let's try and get one. And as again, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching here at the DFS Lab. Hope to see all of you at the top of the leaderboards, and we will catch you next time. Stat, catch you next time, bud.